Terraform. And the advantage of that is like if you have like for example, the AMI script that AMI tag that I was passing in, you can pass it in using basically like when you run the Terraform script. So you see you can do a Terraform apply, and then you can pass in whatever variable you want. So in this case, see the way variables are defined is with like whatever the name is, and the type is like this. It's a little like cumbersome and very kind of like too much detail, but I mean, because if you are familiar with other languages like Python or JavaScript or even Java, like it's much more simpler, but this is the way they've chosen it. So we just have to stick with how they define it. But essentially the benefit of that is then you can change it. So if you use the script that we had kind of developed in the last class, and you just change this one fact here, then instead of like spinning up an Nginx instance, you can spin up your custom instance. And that's what we're going to do. So that script that I've kind of explained in the previous class, we're going to keep revisiting it once in a while. The other thing that you can do, for example, is you can use these variables inside like other variables or other structures. For example, in this case, if you remember, we had developed a web server, which is basically an AWS instance type, which is the EC2. And instead of just writing this hard code again, we can just reuse the variable. So it's just for reusing, you know what variables are for, but it's super convenient. And we didn't do much of that previously, but I'm saying like in the future, if you're doing Terraform, start using variables, because that'll make your life much easier, because not only can you use them in Terraform, but you can also pass them in from outside. So that's pretty useful to know. Data source, this is something else also you can do. It's super interesting, because let's say you don't know ahead of time what's going to happen, right? Maybe you don't know like what the data is. So you can pull from data source, and then basically you can pull like more information from the data source. Like for example, in this case, you can say data is AWS AMI with web server AMI. And then here you can say, for example, the tags are web server and true. And in this case, you will get like a value back for web server AMI from the tag. And then that can be used directly. So I mean, there are different ways to basically pass in the data. You can pass it in through the command line, or you can pull through like some tags that you defined before and get the data. So again, it's a variable, but it's the way you're using the variable that's interesting. So that's there. And then, I mean, the challenge too is pretty simple. It's if you can split out the Terraform code into variables, which I just explained. Like it's very simple, like just the AMI part, if you can pull it out, it's going to be interesting. There's another thing called modules, which I think I will cover. Yeah, so basically what you can do is in Terraform, you can bunch up like some part of the code. Let's say the code that we wrote, there are a few kind of things that are variable, but the code is pretty simple. It basically spins up any AMI that you ask it, and it kind of requests how many copies of that instance you need. So in that code that we had said we need 2, but you can also use the 2 number count as a variable, right? So if you can pass that in from outside saying, look, basically we have the number of instances we need and what instance we need, then this is a very generic code that we've developed, right? It's a code that spins up EC2 instances with an EBS, and you can even do more things like RDS and all later on, but it's a simple code that spins up EC2 and EBS, and that you can convert into a module that you can then reuse into other like Terraform programs. So it's very kind of, and you see like the default module I've shown you in that application graph is called root, right? So they have a module, and then you can inject other modules inside them. You can even reuse your modules in other programs. So it's very powerful. And like we won't cover the details of like how to use modules, but just remember that this is the way in Terraform, like it's basically, think of it like a function, right? So you can write a function and then you can use it in another piece of the code, right? That's the whole benefit here. So you write once and then deploy many times. With Terraform Enterprise, you can actually deploy the module, and that will then give you access to share this module with many other people in your company. So like I explained before, and actually this is something I missed out in the previous class. I think Ridwanul had asked me this question about like how do multiple people handle deploying the code. So first of all, they have their own like keys, right? So first of all, if someone spins up a Terraform instance and another guy is spinning it up, there can be conflicts. But these conflicts, if they're done through Terraform on people's laptops, it depends on timing and who gets it, right? Because at the end of the day, if both of people like do it at the same time, one person's command is going to get executed, the other person's going to say, oh, this already exists, and then come back saying it already exists. So which is fine, like no money's going to get wasted, but there's going to be a conflict. But if you do it with Terraform Enterprise, then what happens is all this orchestration is handed over to Terraform Enterprise, and then from there, like the actual decision, the arbitration is done there. So the cloud only gets one request; it doesn't get two requests, and like it's a much better system. And there you can share code, and there you can modularize your code, and then one user can share, like make another Terraform script using the module of someone else. So you can take a look at Terraform Enterprise. I won't cover it in detail. Also, it costs money. So big companies use Terraform Enterprise. If you're starting out and your company doesn't use Terraform, I would suggest that initially just run Terraform off your server or your laptop. I mean, obviously, like laptops just for testing and development, and then later on you'll deploy that Terraform script on a server somewhere that runs, which is still fine. It's just if there are multiple people, there's code revisions happening, then you may consider going to Terraform Enterprise. And for that, modules become super critical. Even if you're not developing your own modules, you can actually import modules from other people. So that's like another thing you can do.